Ibrahim Traoré, driving Africa's new era of development and sovereignty. In just under 3 years, Captain Ibrahim Traoré has risen from a little-known artillery officer to a global symbol of African pride and sovereignty. To his supporters, he is the young revolutionary who stood up to France, rejected Western dictates, and reimagined Burkina Faso as a sovereign state charting its own path. To his critics, he is untested, ambitious, and ruling through the barrel of a gun. Yet beyond the politics, the picture is extraordinary. Under his leadership, Burkina Faso has seen billions of dollars mobilized, entire sectors restructured, and a bold new narrative of African rebirth capture the imagination of millions, not only within the Sahel but across the continent and the diaspora. While academics highlight gaps, from delayed implementation and heavy militarization to limited transparency, the sheer ambition and symbolic weight of Traoré's agenda are undeniable. In less than 3 years he has mobilized $8 billion to $10 billion in announced programs, reshaping the agenda from aid dependency to sovereign investment, shifted the center of gravity away from France and ECOWAS toward African-led and multipolar partnerships with Mali, Niger, Russia, China, and others, positioned Burkina Faso as a test case for Pan-African resilience, even while battling insurgency, sanctions, and regional isolation. This is not just governance, it is a deliberate act of nation reimagination. Traoré has woven together 3 themes: sovereignty, dignity, and rebirth, into what many call an African Renaissance. But unlike past Renaissance talk in Africa, Traoré's projects go beyond symbolism. They carry massive socio-economic implications. Jobs created, food secured, land restored, homes rebuilt, power grids expanded. And crucially, they are increasingly funded not by former colonial masters, but by Burkina Faso itself, and new partners who treat Africa as a partner, not a pupil. For decades, Burkina Faso received on average $800 million, $1.2 billion per year in French and Western aid, much of it tied to donor conditions, military support, or emergency relief. Today, under Traoré, the annual scale of announced sovereign investments exceeds $3 billion. That shift is why social media resonates so powerfully with him. It's not only about resisting France, it's about mobilizing more money, more vision, and more independence than France ever delivered. AES Development Fund, $2 billion to $3 billion. Funding, jointly financed by Burkina Faso, Mali, Niger, supplemented by pledges from Russia and potential Chinese infrastructure loans. Impact, cross-border highways, energy grids, and trade corridors will link 70 million people. Economists project intra-Sahel trade could grow by $7 billion annually. Compared to France, ECOWAS. Projects under French influence rarely exceeded $300 million to $400 million annually for Burkina Faso. The AES fund dwarfs that. Implication, Traoré positions Burkina Faso as co-founder of a Pan-African confederation. Energy security projects, $1.5 billion. Funding, primarily China's Exim Bank plus joint ventures with Turkish and Moroccan firms, state co-financing. Impact, solar parks like Zagtuli 2 will supply power to 10 million people by 2030. This can cut business costs by 40%, reduce blackouts, and extend study hours for students. Compared to France, French EDF projects in Burkina Faso averaged $100 million to $150 million. Traoré has scaled it tenfold. Implication, green energy sovereignty. The Sahel's sun becomes a weapon against poverty. Resilience. Burkina, 2075 Master Plan, $1 billion first phase. Funding, national budget allocations plus climate adaptation grants, African Development Bank, UN Green Climate Fund. Impact, long-term infrastructure for health, education, irrigation, and climate defense. Protects food and water for future generations of 40 million people. Compared to France, France rarely committed beyond 5-year aid cycles. Burkina now has a 50-year vision. Implication, a generational shift. Planning centuries ahead, not just for elections. Military and security infrastructure, $980 million annually. Funding, state budget, new gold royalties, and arms partnerships with Russia. Impact, over 50,000 local militia, VDPs recruited, jobs for youth, reduction of French troop dependence. Compared to France, France's Operation Barkhane cost $800 million per year, but most went to French troops, not Burkinabe. Now Burkina spends the same on its own defense. Implication, controversial but popular, African armies financed by Africans. Transport and roads modernization, $800 million. Funding: AES joint budget, China and state infrastructure bonds. Impact: cuts food prices, boosts trade. Each paved road kilometer is estimated to raise rural household income by 10 to 15%. Compared to France, annual French road aid was less than $100 million. Implication: the arteries of Pan-African commerce are finally being built at scale. Urban water infrastructure, $700 million. Funding: Islamic Development Bank, African Development Bank, and the National Water Utility. Impact: clean water for over 5 million people, reduction of cholera and typhoid by up to 50% in urban centers. Compared to France, French water projects averaged $40 million annually. Implication: water sovereignty, critical in a climate-stressed Sahel. National Food Security Plan, $600 million. Funding: National Agriculture Ministry, AES contributions, and bilateral support from Russia, fertilizers and tractors. Impact: boosts grain output by 30%, aims to end dependence on French wheat imports by 2027. Compared to France, French food aid was short-term grain deliveries, worth less than $50 million yearly. Implication: food independence, Africa feeding itself. Soil and water conservation, $400 million. Funding: climate finance funds, NGOs, and national co-investment. Impact: restores over 100,000 hectares of land, secures livelihoods for hundreds of villages. Implication: the Great Green Wall inside Burkina Faso. Education expansion, $400 million. Funding: national education budget and AES solidarity funds. Impact: goal of 70% literacy by 2030, trains 15,000 new teachers. Education raises long-term GDP growth by 0.7% annually. Compared to France, French scholarships for Burkinabe rarely exceeded $20 million per year. Implication: liberation of the African mind. Health infrastructure, $350 million. Funding: national health budget, Islamic Development Bank, AES Health Fund. Impact: expands maternal care, saves an estimated 10,000 mothers' lives annually. Compared to France, French aid was mostly NGO-based, $25M/year. Implication: healing the nation with African hands. Affordable housing for IDPs, $300 million. Funding: AES reconstruction funds, state budget, UNHCR contributions. Impact: homes for 2M displaced, prevents slum growth, restores dignity. Implication: rebuilding the social fabric after war. Food processing and storage, $250 million. Funding: national budget, private cooperatives, Russia grain partnerships. Impact: cuts post-harvest losses from 30% to 10%, raises farmer income by 20%. Implication: first step toward African agro-industrialization. ICT and e-governance, $200 million. Funding: AFRICOM partnerships, state budget, Chinese tech investment. Impact: broadband rollout, e-schools and e-government reduce bureaucracy by 40%. Implication: Africa coding its own destiny. Research and Innovation Fund, $150 million. Funding: AES Academic Consortium, IDRC Canada. African Union funds. Impact: grants for labs and startups. Could seed biotech and ICT firms. Implication: Sahel Silicon Valley in the making. Reconstruction of recaptured towns, $150 million. Funding: AES stabilization budget, NGOs national budget. Impact: restores towns like Silenzo with schools, clinics, and roads. Implication: rebirth from ashes, turning terror into community revival. So, is Ibrahim Traoré overhyped? Yes, in the sense that implementation lags and financing is uneven. But no leader in recent Sahelian history has mobilized billions, restructured entire sectors, and reframed sovereignty in so short a time. Compared to decades of French-led aid averaging $1B/year, Traoré has announced $8.10B of sovereign and multipolar investments in under 3 years. The numbers speak loudly. More roads, dams, and housing and planning than Burkina Faso saw in the previous decade. A continental alliance, the AES, worth more than French aid packages. Education, energy, and agriculture scaled up to levels that could change Burkina Faso's GDP trajectory. He is not just a symbol. He is re-engineering the economic and social base of Burkina Faso. For a continent weary of dependency, Ibrahim Traoré is proof that even a small, fragile state can dare to dream big, mobilize billions, and inspire an entire generation. This is why social media loves him. This is why he is praised as the face of the African Renaissance. And this is why his story is not just about Burkina Faso. It is about the future of Africa itself. Please like, comment, subscribe, and share if you have enjoyed this video.